So good morning everyone. We are starting with CAT 2024 slot 3 VARC and let's begin with question number first. So here we are talking about lyric poetry is a genre of private meditation rather than public commitment. So you can see we are talking about lyric poetry and the impulse in Marxism toward changing the society deemed unacceptable in its basic design, and this would seem to place demands on lyric poetry. That such poetry, with its tendency towards personal, small scale, could never answer. Okay, and they have used the term idiosyncratic. Okay, so there is within Marxism, however, also a strand of thought that would locate in lyric poetry. Alternative modes of perception, description that call forth a vision of worlds at odds with respective reality, or that draw attention to the working of ideology within hegemonic culture. So the poetry imagination may indeed reflect larger social concerns, but it may also be implicitly critical and utopian. So when you talk about something critical, utopian means you're talking about something implicitly judgmental and imaginary something. But when you see this particular export, you see that lyric poetry is compared, or you can see is shown as a parallelism with Marxism, that how it is different. So when you talk about both of things, as in you have to find out the main summary here. Okay, and when you talk about both the concepts, you see that lyric poetry is more concerned about private meditation rather than public commitment. Okay, so when I talk about Marxism, this is impulse towards changing a complete society. But when I talk about this lyric poetry, it is very personal within a person himself. So when I take first option, the focus of lyric poetry is as personal, may not seem compatible with Marxism. It is possible to envisage poetry as a symbol of resistance against oppressive culture. So this symbolification is not mentioned in the past. So we have to eliminate this. When you come to option number 2, Marxism has internal contradiction, due to which one strain seems no merit in lyric poetry, while another appreciates alternative modes of perception in poetry. Now the thing is, we don't contradictions regarding Marxism here. Okay, so when you talk about the passage, you see within Marxism, however, also strand of thought would locate in lyric poetry. But here the thing is alternative modes of perception. Before that, internal contradictions in Marxism. So this becomes something very extreme in relation with the passage. So it also gets eliminated like one. When you come to option number 3, Marxism makes unreasonable demands on lyric poetry, and it has its own merit largely ignored by Marxism due to its personal nature. So we cannot contrast like this, that both things are totally different, totally opposite. Yes, there is difference, but how? The lyric poetry is largely personal, while that of Marxism brings change in society. You can take this fourth point from line number 1, as you can relate that when you talk about private meditation as well as public commitment. Okay, unless the difference is resolved, poetry will remain largely utopian. You can see all the three options never talk about the basic nature of this poetry, which is given in last line. Poetic imagination reflects larger concerns, but it is implicitly critical and utopian. Okay, so our answer becomes option number 4. Coming to the next one, see this particular question, question number 2. You have been provided with one sentence, taken outside the village of Trang Bang on June 8, 1972. The picture captured the trauma and indiscriminate violence of a conflict that claimed by some estimates a million or more civilians' lives. Now, what happened? This is about some incident. So, when I start with the paragraph, I have to make sure that this sentence occupies place 1, 2, 3, or 4. Okay, now when I come to the paragraph, the horrifying photograph of children fleeing a deadly Nepal attack has become a defining image not only of Vietnam War but of the 20th century. Now, if I put the first one, it is incomplete. Why? Because we are describing a photograph, but in line number 1, the horrifying photograph of children, okay, and it has become a defining image. Okay, now the image has been described in line number 2, dark smoke billowing behind them. Young subject faces are painted with a mixture of terror, pain, and confusion. Now you talk about this particular description of the event, and when you say soldiers from armies follow help them. So these all the three lines are description, and then you come to the major picture. Okay, so the introduction of picture is here officially titled this. So when the picture was taken, the picture was taken outside here. So your answer becomes option number 3. And this place is 3. So when I talk about this place 3, it comes here. Okay, so this becomes option number 2. And you can also relate it by like this: the picture, it was taken outside this, and the picture was officially titled the terror of the war. So this plays 3, but it is given in option number 2. So your answer becomes option 2. Come to the next question. So you have 4 summaries, and you have to find out the best, which of the following best captures the essence of the passage. So humans have managed to tweak the underlying biology of various plants and animals to produce high-tech crops and high-tech crops and microbes. But regulating these entities is complicated, as the framework of policies and procedures are outdated, not flexible enough to adapt to emerging technology. Okay, so what is outdated here? Framework of policies and procedures are outdated. Okay, and not flexible enough to adapt to emerging technology. Question is whether regulation will ever be able to keep up with human innovation to regulate living things, okay, which are apt to be unpredictable and unique. So to capture all the potential risks, which new biological entities are introduced or when they pass on variation of their genes. Okay, so when I talk about this, you can see I'm talking about some framework of policies which are outdated. And then there is a major question what the author wants to put forward, whether the regulation will ever be able to keep up with human innovation, regulate living things which are apt to be unpredictable and unique, to capture all potential risk when new biological entities are introduced or when they pass on variations of their genes. Fine. So when I talk about 1, 2, 3, 4 options, see, first one, the mercurial nature of biological entities call for scientists to shape the regulation governing emerging technologies. Now, what happens? This is not a call for scientists because scientist term is not mentioned as in. But the thing is, we are not. The author is not putting caution for scientists. The author is putting caution in general, and they are not calling scientists, or they are not asking for some help from the scientists or some regulation from the scientists to shape the regulations governing emerging technology. So this doesn't go with the flow of the passage or information given of the passage. So we can eliminate this. When I come to option number 2, problem with formulating regulation for innovation in the scientific arena. So what is the problem with formulation? You have to see to regulate living things, to unpredictable and unique. Okay, it is impossible to imagine outcomes of risk related to outcomes of all the research. So when you talk about impossible to imagine the risk, okay, so yes, it is relating like which are apt to be unpredictable and unique, but it is not the problem with formulation or regulation, because the thing is regulating these entities is complicated. It is given framework or policies are outdated. Okay, and this line is saying problem with formulating regulation, so this becomes different. Okay, we are not having problem for formulating. Complicated and outdated things are already there, so you can eliminate this. When you come to third, current regulation of biotechnology is outdated, but it is debatable if we can create a framework, imaginative, flexible, to cover all the contingencies in this fast changing arena. Okay, so you can talk about this, yes, because it is outdated, it is mentioned. Then question is, so this becomes a very questionable thing, a debatable thing. So yes, I can take it as an essence. When you come to option number 4, a new framework of rules and procedures to regulation of the most recent research emerging from biotechnology is urgently needed. We are not talking about urgent need. We are talking about whether will ever be able to keep up with human innovation. Okay, so our answer becomes option number 3.